fast, and then you ask me to do all this other work?
Oh, it's not work, it's decision making.
You're a
Lord
funny
knows
lady,
that's not
Julie.
work.
All right, we are reconvened at 8:07, and we go to Natural Resources. Ms. Polly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Natural Resources budget. I put a few things in the summary for you. Right now, our Natural Resources Department is designed, or the natural resources aspect of our department is designed to administer and facilitate the development in the city. That's the major thing that we do, is we review the management plans, tree inventories that come in with developments. We also, part of their mission for the Environmental Advisory Committee and why the Natural Resources Department was put together a few years ago, was to facilitate and develop the citywide environmental and conservation initiatives to protect, restore, and enhance the natural resources within the city. Sounds very nice. No, that's what we try to do. We have, when we had a natural resources coordinator here up until 2008, we did put a lot of ordinances in place. We updated many of our ordinances. We put some policies in place, some manuals in place that we use, that we have been able to continue to use and utilize as we move forward and look at the future of natural resources of Shakopee, even without that natural resources coordinator. So we have still, the EAC is still active. They don't meet on a regularly monthly basis anymore. They meet on an as needed. But we have actually had 3 meetings this year so far, which is very good, and we do have some other things coming up. So we will be meeting more often than just once or twice a year. But their goals, I put on here, their goals is to review land use and development proposals. They recommend policies, ordinance, and procedures to manage our natural resources. They provide direction on the creation of greenways and the assets to the city, ecological assets. They provide guidance concerning citywide environmental education programs and feedback and direction to residents regarding natural resource topics. Many of the things that they've done this year so far is developments. We have had some developments come in this year. Unlike last year, we didn't have a whole lot that we reviewed, but we've had significant ones come in that really take a lot of time, natural resources, to do it correctly. You take it to the EAC, they look at the tree inventory and the tree management plan that's put in place. We have an ordinance that requires tree replacement on any development and whether or not it falls within our natural resources corridor design criteria. So it is quite a significant effort that we try to put towards natural resources, even with limited staff. The current staffing right now is myself to do the majority of the natural resources related administration. As far as the actual tree identification or disease management of reviewing trees, the Public Works Department has taken that initiative on. I am a certified tree inspector. However, our Parks Department has 4 of them on staff, and so they usually have more time to go out and look at a tree if we have one that's in question. They send a staff out, and then they usually contact me, and I coordinate with the homeowner of what we find that it might be. But right now, that is currently most of the direction for natural resources does come from myself. And this year has been quite significant in the time I've put into natural resources, mainly because of the developments that have come through. So one thing we're looking at bringing forward this year is a natural resources technician. This was brought forward the past couple of years. Last year, it was brought to the City Council, and the City Council did say, no, we are not going to fund this position. However, with a new council on today, it's being brought forward again. It was advised to be brought forward, but it is brought forward at a different level, which I'll explain in just a second, from what it was before. Budget highlights, a couple of the things that we allocate still in our natural resources budget is in our engineering consultants. We provide funding in there because we have consulted out some surveying work for boundary marking. A lot of this is done when we have encroachments in our conservation easements that we need to have verified, that sort of thing. And then the other professional services, this is the biggest item we have in our budget. It's last year we had it down to 16,000, but prior years before that it's been 20,000. I upped it back up to 20,000 this year for 2 reasons. One is that the EAC has committed, and the City Council, because it has come to you, committed to establishing prairie plantings within the city. So we have maintenance of 5 prairies that were put together 4 years ago, and 3 more pond prairie plantings, and we continue to look at what we can do to improve some of those other sites and add more of that. But then in addition, this professional service line item is there also to allow us to have funding that if a disease such as the emerald, or an insect such as the emerald ash borer were to come and be found in the city of Shakopee or in the area, it's going to be significant resources to, one, even put a plan together on how we're going to deal with it. We have a significant amount of ash tree here in the city, and that could be very costly to us if we were to go and have to remove all of them. No, that's not necessarily the plan that we would take, but we would use some of this funding for professional services to help us put together that plan on how we would deal with that. And it may cover some of the costs that we would have to remove some of it. Tree removal right now is typically done by our Public Works Department, both the Parks Department and the Streets Department, depending upon where the tree is. But our staffing probably would not be able to allow the significant removal if a disease or an insect that would cause a disease such as the emerald ash borer would come into town. No capital requests at this time. The EAC is the Environmental Advisory Committee is the main committee that we oversee for the natural resources. We try to use them, however, without a natural resources coordinator or technician on staff, and it only being myself. My resources have been very limited to really take the time to be forward thinking on our ordinances, to bring them forward, to put any new initiatives in front of them. I just haven't had the ability to do that with the time restraints that I've had. However, I do know after this last big development that's come in, we do need to review our tree management ordinance again as far as what are our goals in the city. Right now it's a replacement ordinance. So we really are reactive to a development. They say they want to come in and remove X number of trees. Our ordinance doesn't say they can't. It just says what they have to replace it with. Now if you take down large 24 to 30 inch trees and you're replacing them with 2-inch bald and burlap trees, is that really what we want our city landscape to look like? So that's something that we need to discuss and really see what that ordinance is that we want to look forward to. The future budget issues that we need to be aware of is proactively maintaining our urban forests with the threat of the different diseases that are coming through. I believe it was St. Paul or Minneapolis. Minneapolis, I believe, just found another pocket of the emerald ash borer, so it's moving. We had a very large infestation of the lilac borer this year in Shakopee, and it does hit ash trees. So we've had many, many calls that people think the ash borer is here in the city, but it's a lilac borer. It may kill smaller ash trees. We just have to wait and see what the effects are next year. If you go over by the 17th Avenue Sports Complex, Saks area, those developments, that's where it's really hit hard this year. And then providing adequate natural resources review of the natural resources when developments come in. If we get any large developments like we've had, if we've had multiple of those, I would have a very hard time keeping up with that review and management of that area just by myself with the other duties that we have. So that's really where we want to, what is our focus on natural resources? What is it that we want to be? Shakopee does have some significant natural resources that we have within the community, and how we want to work with them and how we want to maintain them as we move forward and more development comes in is a question that the City Council, had decided a few years ago when they had the natural resources technician that was hired that they wanted to put more efforts towards natural resources. Now, since that position hasn't been filled, it's a question of, where are we at with that. With the natural resources technician position that brought forward, as I mentioned, the last position that we had here was a natural resources coordinator. That was one step up from this technician. When that position was originally hired on in the city and developed, it was a technician position. And then as development boomed and the demand became higher and the job became more entailed, that position was made into a coordinator. So right now I'm proposing that it goes back to a technician. What we're really looking at more is the forestry, woodland management abilities to maintain. The past natural resources coordinator was able to do a lot of wetland issues and a lot of other environmental review that I don't see the real need for as we move forward. The real need is in the forestry and the conservation easement management that we have. right now we do have an engineer on staff in our engineering department that does our wetland delineations and has the expertise to do that area. So some of the things that we currently don't complete because we just don't have the staffing to do it is updating our comprehensive plan and our natural resources corridor, always tongue twister, corridor design criteria that was put together in 2005. Administering our shade tree disease and prevention ordinance. This is something that we haven't proactively gone out to landowners and say, you have Dutch elm disease, per our ordinance, you have X amount of days to remove it. We do have an ordinance in place that says that they require that, but we just don't have the ability to go out and seek those properties at this time. Updating the natural resources inventory, enforcing management of our conservation easements, our encroachments. A few years ago, we did have an intern that helped with some of those encroachments. We were able to, at that time, get all of our conservation easements encroachments identified. However, that was 2 years ago, so I have not been out there to see if there's more in our conservation easements. This position could also do our park encroachments as well, and we just scratched the surface with the intern a few years ago on those. Coordinating buckthorn management in our parks and our conservation easements, providing more education to the community, coordinating our Arbor Day tree sale. We did not do it this last year, but we had done it in years past. And then providing other natural resources classes are things we just don't do right now. I do try to put a natural resources page in each of our brochures. If there's something that comes forward, I try to get it out to our cable access or on our website, but it's just not something that we've done proactively. So we're looking at bringing this position, seeking this position to come back to do many of these things at a step down from what the last position currently was. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Natural resources questions? Councilor Clay.
Like with the other budget improvement items, when you get down the pay grade estimate, that's a fully loaded number?
Yes, I believe so. That's our pay scale.
That's taxes, license, shipping, destination charges, and dealer prep?
No, those dollar amounts under the pay grade estimate is the salary range. Jamie, can you slide it up a little bit?
Oh.
Yeah.
We don't
So
have
we
what
add
it
to
would
that
cost.
We have to.
25%?
You wanna add about a 24% on there.
If it's a March 1st start, I think we had an
Right.
earlier discussion tonight, and so the
Then
fully
you
loaded
offset
cost,
that back the other way.
it'd be closer to the upper end of the pay grade if you add in the benefits for the remaining 10 months.
Councilor Lehman.
What's the likelihood of getting some of these things taken care of with interns as we have in the past?
I didn't have an intern this year or last year because I don't have the time to manage an intern as well as do the work that's required of the management part of it and then manage the department. So the 1 year that we did have the intern, it was extremely, extremely hard to manage. We could hire an intern to do some of the stuff, but a lot of it, it's better off that I do it myself because it takes just as much time for me to manage an intern than to get some of the other stuff that I need to get done. So I don't think it's a very efficient way of doing it.
Other questions? All right. Thank you. 5B, administration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. I have before you tonight the administration department's budget, or the vast majority of it. Our administration department here at the city consists of 6 areas: general administration, human resources or personnel, communications, telecommunications, and by telecommunications we traditionally mean the operation of our government access channel and our public access channel, information technology or IT, as well as facilities maintenance. The budget for facilities maintenance is a standalone budget, even though we consider that function and staff to be part of the administration department. And you saw the facilities maintenance budget request at your workshop last week. So I won't be going into that any further tonight unless some additional questions have occurred to you on the facilities maintenance subject. So we're going to be focusing on the first 5 items that you see on the list here. Major responsibilities of the administration department are leadership and implementation of the council's policies and directives, coordination and oversight of day-to-day city operations, and the provision of administrative support services, by which I mean human resources, communications, telecom, IT, and facilities. The city administrator, Mr. McNeil, handles the vast majority of the first 2, and I tend to specialize or focus on that 3rd item, being the provision of administrative support services. When people ask me what I do here at the city, and I list off those things, I often sum it up as I try to take care of the things that need to be done so that the police officers can be police, fire can do fire, public works can do public works. We make sure that their employees are hired, paid, receive benefits, that their offices get cleaned, that the light bulbs turn on when they come in, that their computer works, their phone works when they pick it up, etc. Highlights of the 2013 Administration Department requests that are in front of you. The baseline request for the Administration Department overall is a 3% increase over 2012. The vast majority of that comes from increased personnel costs. We took a office service worker at part-time in the Administration Department and made it a full-time secretarial position as part of the retirement of the previous city clerk and the merger of the city clerk's department into the finance department. We did kind of an administrative reorganization there. So you will see an increase in wages for the administration department. They are offset by equal dollar amount reductions in finance and city clerk's office. So finance and city clerk combined are down $19,000 in wages, and administration is up $16,000, I think. And then the other increase you would notice would be in the telecom budget for professional services. That's increased by $15,000 over this year. That's on the recommendation of your Telecommunications Advisory Commission, which is recommending that the city do a franchise fee audit. That is an audit of what we receive from Comcast Cable on a quarterly basis. The total amount of franchise fees per year total in the $300,000 neighborhood. It has been 7 years since we've last audited their books to make sure that the checks they send us every quarter are in fact for the correct amount, and the TAC feels like it's time to look at that again. The $15,000 will get you, I believe, a 3-year look back. So we won't be going all the way back to the last time that we did an audit, but it'll give us a 3-year look back. And you'll see requests for 2013 in the form of a new or an additional human resources technician. That's a full-time staff position. And a suggestion that you consider increasing the communications coordinator position that we currently have from part-time to full-time status. Looking ahead to future year budget issues, the main thing on my horizon that would be different about next year from this year would be implementation of the federal healthcare reform law. Lots of those things take effect January 1 of 2014. So when we're standing here next year, those requirements are going to have to play into our conversations and our thinking. So coming up for 2012, you've got the renewal of the, not renewal, but going out for competitive proposals on the city's garbage contract. And when you oversee and lead the big picture, as Mark does in general government, all of those things play into our workload in the administration department. So, if I could, in your packet was a page specifically devoted to the human resources issues.
Page number
24. Our Human Resources Department is responsible for what I would consider a full range of HR services for 125 full-time and over 200 part-time and seasonal employees. We do payroll processing, benefit administration, recruitment and hiring. We research and implement the union contracts, develop, interpret, and enforce our personnel policies. We do administration and compliance for a wide variety of regulatory functions, COBRA, FMLA, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and others. Our current staffing for these tasks is a portion of my time and one full-time human resources technician. She is the person that actually pulls in the time cards and processes our payroll. We do pay our full-time employees every 2 weeks. Then we do a third payroll every month that is a monthly payroll. Pays our elected officials and our fire department. We have no significant changes built into the 2013 budget. So the dollars that you will see on the spreadsheets in there are to continue as we have been operating. Our major budget items include professional services. This is money to pay for labor relations advice and expertise, management fees for our employee benefit accounts. We have a very large software budget in this division that pays Logis for our payroll software. And the conference schools and training budget might stand out to you as being significantly larger. We carry in this budget all of our safety training for every department in the city, as well as some money to do other citywide trainings such as sexual harassment prevention, drugs and alcohol in the workplace, those types of broad topic trainings that go out to all of our employees. That leads into the request for an additional position, which is put together as page 26 of your packet. I am asking the council to consider the addition of a second human resources technician for the full year. The total cost of that, wages and benefits, would be $67,600. Quite honestly, we are not keeping our heads above water in the HR department at the moment. The workload has become too much for a full-time person and a portion of my time to manage. We're falling behind on items that are regulatory compliance, and we're not doing things that I would consider core HR services. Performance reviews of employees are not getting done. A lot of training and development of our employees, there just is not enough hours in the day or man hours in the work week to get done. The city spends $12.4 million on wages and benefits this year. It's 61.5% of your total operating budget for the year. That's a huge investment, and I would strongly suggest that you consider adding an additional staff person in HR to help you fully utilize that and make sure that it's managed and that we're serving our employees. Our employees, in my opinion, are waiting too long to get an answer from me on one of their benefits or their questions. And because of my responsibilities in other administrative areas, other things are not getting done. New website, paperless council packets, those types of projects are not moving at the pace that I'd like to see them move, and I suspect they're not moving at the pace that some of you would like to see them move. And that goes back to the amount of nitty-gritty HR work that has to be done in an organization with this many employees. So yeah, total cost of that is $67,600 for the year. Like I said, we employ, last year we issued 378 W-2s. So that's a lot of people getting paychecks and having questions and needing to be served in our organization. So that's HR.
So we don't do performance evaluations on anyone?
We do performance evaluations. We focus our efforts on people that are newly hired, people that are coming off probation, any areas where we've made a structural change, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But quite honestly, in a lot of departments, I started out, when I first started in this job, I'd send each department head a monthly reminder. Here are your employees that have anniversaries this year. They need to get done. When they didn't magically appear on my desk, I'd follow up and try to, you know, work through all this. And honestly, no, that's just not happening. I focus my efforts on making sure that people coming off of a probationary period are getting a performance review, and I nag until it arrives in my office, or try to dig into, you know, why it's not showing up. Is there a problem? And we're dealing with the squeaky wheels.
Okay.
But I would argue that's not the best way to manage the investment that you're making in your people.
Any other questions on HR stuff? All right.
The next area that I wanted to highlight and pull out of administration is in communications. I've set this one up a little bit differently. I hope that's acceptable to you. But kind of identified three what I consider to be you know, big picture policy issues for the council in the communications field. There was some conversation about this on the first night of our budget workshop, because I know some members of council had put forward a desire to see a public relations position / social media coordinator. We currently have a communications coordinator. That position has been in place for, off the top of my head, I want to say 4 years. I could be off by a year or two, but about 4 years. Started off working 20 hours a week. This year we upped that to 25 hours a week. To have that person here full-time would be an added cost of $35,000. That's the additional wages, as well as making that being here full-time would make the position benefits eligible. The difference between part-time and full-time is not unlike what you heard from Ms. Polly earlier or other departments. It's the difference between being reactive and being proactive. If you would like to see more done in the way of social media, in the way of communicating what's going on here in the city of Shakopee out to the public, my recommendation to you is not to hire an additional staff person, but to more fully utilize the skills and abilities that we have in our current communications coordinator position. So that's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is the Hometown Messenger. The Hometown Messenger is a quarterly paper and ink newsletter that we send to every address in the 55379 zip code. We have been doing this since 2008 budget year. It goes out quarterly. It's a 4-page document, and it costs us $23,000 a year to print and mail. That's not the staff time that goes into writing the content of the articles and editing articles and working with the different departments to gather the information. That's postage and printing costs. And so I would pose to the council the question of, do you want to continue to do this? Is it the best use of $23,000 a year? Previous councils have felt very strongly at times that this was the only communication piece that went to every household in town. You know, we can look at subscription rates for the Shakopee Valley News and what those are. We can look at penetration rates for our government access channel on Comcast Cable. None of those even make the 50% mark as far as reaching every household in town. So there have been previous councils that felt very strongly that we needed to continue this item that reached everybody. It is reaching everybody. I can't tell you who's reading it, you know, and who's lining the litter box with it. I just don't know. You know, I have no way to measure a paper item like that of how many people are reading it. And secondly, its format is challenged. It's a 4-page format. It's a fairly small newsletter, and it goes out quarterly. And I would acknowledge, try as we might, it doesn't have a lot of hard-hitting news because of the quarterly timing. We find ourselves either not knowing the details of an upcoming thing, or by the time the next quarterly newsletter comes around, it's old news. It's not news anymore. It's been published, you know, in all the places that you can think of. So options would be, obviously, you can continue doing what we're doing. We could discontinue a printed newsletter altogether. Like I said, we haven't always done it. The printed newsletter is something that's come and gone over the years, as best I can tell. And we could use that money and that staff time toward other higher priority communication initiatives. Another alternative, if you want to keep some form, is Ms. Polly referenced the fact that the Parks and Rec Department is going to go to their own brochure, which again would be mailed to everybody in the Shakopee zip code. I have brought a sample that I can leave out and you can look at. The city of Chanhassen, one of our neighbors, publishes their Park and Rec brochure. They do it 3 times a year, just like Ms. Polly is proposing for the new standalone one in our parks. And they put newsletter, general news of the city in the first 4 or 5 pages of this. And then it gets into your class offerings and your T-ball sign up and that type of thing. That would take us from quarterly to 4 times a year down to only 3 times a year. It would likely save some money. I can't tell you at this point exactly what this would cost us to do. But if you're interested in that, Ms. Polly and I can certainly put our heads together and kind of try to figure out total cost of this publication and what might be allocated to communications and what would be allocated to Parks and Recreation.
Councilor Whiting?
Did you say the Park and Rec book goes out 3 times a year?
Yes.
Oh.
It currently does. And so if we partnered with them, we would be going from 4 down to 3 times a year. again, you'd be reaching everybody, and again, you wouldn't know who was reading it and who wasn't necessarily. It still has our timeliness issue. Instead of 4 times a year, we're now 3 times a year, so we still run into that news issue.
Councilor Lehman.
If we made a spot on the website for that kind of communication area, we would be able to log how many folks are reading it.
We do an e-newsletter right now, so you don't even have to come, you have to sign up for it. But once people sign up for it, we send it to you. We track not only how many people are signed up for it, but we actually track how many people open the email that they get saying, here's your newsletter from the city of Shakopee. And we track, I believe we can track click-through, because when you get the email, you get like the first 3 sentences of the story, and if you click on the link, it takes you into our webpage and gives you a full news article, and we can tell how many people click through those links. If you want to rely on that as your general communication method, though, we have a lot of work to do in terms of recruitment. We're in the hundreds as far as subscribers to that e-newsletter right now. So we will need to, possibly look at some paid advertising, stuffers in public utility bills, everything we can possibly think about screaming to people, sign up for the city's e-newsletter. I don't know if you caught the news last week or the week before, though. Some of our neighboring cities have recently drawn the ire of their residents because the mailing list for our newsletter is public information by state law. And those cities are getting requests from political parties and all kinds of different groups that want their email list. And then they email to those people on the city's email list. And there is nothing we can do to stop that or protect that.
Maybe,
Councilor Lehman.
I think, I'm thinking of this differently than what you're telling me.
Okay?
I'm thinking of, I want to find out what's going on in Shakopee, so I go to the Shakopee City website.
Yep.
Somewhere on that website,
Yes.
if I click this link, it'll take me to a page that'll tell me what's new and fascinating in Shakopee. This bridge is being built, this station is being built, or whatever,
I feel pretty confident that there's nothing that goes out in our newsletter that you can't also find on our website.
Okay. But we could allocate just a page and a link and a tab for that.
I anticipate being before you 4 weeks from tomorrow with a request to move ahead with the redesign of our website. And so we could do it now, but we can do it even better, and we can make that a focus of a redesign if that would be the council's choice, that's how they want news put out there.
Well, I'm thinking that doesn't have a whole lot of cost.
To do it on our current site, no, we can, try to place even more emphasis on news. Like I said, what we're putting in our newsletter is already there. We can organize it a little better to try to really say, click right here for news. But once you're at our front page of our website, that is our news.
Right.
What's on there.
So if we got rid of the messenger that we're doing and did it on the website and in the Park and Rec book, we would probably be hitting the same amount of audience, and at least half of it would be trackable. The website side would be trackable.
Yes. And if you're interested in that, though, you're not going to save the full $23,000. Ms. Polly's going to expect me out of my, the communications budget to fork over for those extra pages in the Park and Rec brochure and pay a portion of the postage and so forth.
We just tell
So
her to throw it in, or we won't approve it.
We'll need to refine. We'll need to really refine those numbers and figure out what does that cost.
Councilor Whiting.
What is the cost of putting out the Park and Rec brochure with the community ed? What is the cost to the city portion of that?
I'm not involved in that directly, so I can't. I'm sure Ms. Polly.
Is this $23,000 that Jamie wanted above and beyond what we're already paying?
Yes,
Yes, it is.
Wow,
that's to go independent, to go standalone.
that doesn't seem right. But if you're paying $23,000 for the Hometown Messenger, then it could correlate. It depends on how all the mailing costs.
There have been, there's differing opinions. Some people have argued to me that, well, nobody that doesn't have kids ever even opens the Park and Rec brochures. There's a lot of programming in there that's not for kids, that's for
agree too,
residents of
I
all ages. I personally think Chanhassen does a pretty good job with their cover design of kind of telling you what's inside here. There's nothing on here that says, hey, this is for kids. This particular issue has a child on the front cover, but so that's the Hometown Messenger and some options for you if you'd like to do things a little bit differently than we're doing now, either to save money or to improve our communications reach. The last issue that I want to make you aware of is the new website. And that is to tell you that I'm not asking for money in next year's budget for a new website. The reason is I think we can deliver one by the first quarter of next year out to the public if you're willing to invest in it this fall. And that would mean using fund balance dollars when we come forward on the 18th, I think is the date that we have penciled in to bring you a proposal for a new website. So.
Should have let off with that.
What?
Should have let off with that one.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, start positive. I'll remember that.
I do not have specific sheets for you for the IT budget. It's wages and benefits for those employees. We talked about the IT fund that actually buys all of our computer and software 2 weeks ago, so there's nothing changed there, and my sheet would have had one bullet point that said wages and benefits. Similarly, for telecommunications, with the exception of that $15,000 for a franchise fee audit that the TAC has recommended, it is a status quo year. So.
Questions? IT wise, I've been told many times that we're significantly understaffed in what we need to accomplish IT. Is that not the case, or is that not where you want to go right now, or what's the reasoning for not bringing anyone forward for IT?
I mentioned when I was here last week, I did ask for more money in professional services for IT for next year, and I see that as the next step to better meeting our needs before we go to a full-time position. I see the human resources technician as the #1 priority in the areas that I oversee at this point. And the full-time communications coordinator a close second to that. Sometimes some things that are talked about as IT don't actually fall to IT, such as the website. I mean, people might be thinking, why can't we do a new website faster? We need more IT people. We actually don't run our website that much, doesn't have that much of an impact on our IT department. It's really a communications task and function and budget expenditure. Could I keep a third IT person busy full-time? Definitely. I could keep them busy. But I guess I feel it's my job to prioritize my requests to you, and I think we can continue to serve our customers in the various departments with the staff we have with an increase in professional services. The other thing is professional services is kind of project money. It allows me to get the projects done. If I had a third full-time person, the city's various departments would soak them up with password resets and kind of all of the nitty-gritty, and some of those big projects might still not get done even with having a third person here, you know? So I think professional services is the way to go for this year. Can we continue forever with 2 IT people in a city that relies more and more and more and more on computer technology? No, we can't. It's going to be coming down the road.
All right, other questions? All right, thank you very much. Julie.
Want me to roll on this?
Yes, please.
I can. I was thinking back to last year's budget, of which you recall was my first budget with the city. And it was kind of a fog as to what we really covered with the revenues, which kind of made me stop and think here. So I thought, well, I'm gonna start with some supplementary basic overviews of general fund revenues. As we've talked through this whole budget cycle, you've seen all the departments and all the divisions and all the business units of the general fund. The thing that makes governmental accounting so unique is that you have fundamentally a series of revenues. This is on page 31 of your book. And the primary revenues of the city, pretty much across the board, flow in through the general fund. So I'd just kind of like to walk you through some of the elements that make up the general fund revenues. The biggest portion you're going to ever see in a city's budget is the general fund property taxes. And that's comprised of the property tax levy, There's also some delinquencies, some mobile home tax. This is also the area your fiscal disparities comes into. So if you try and compare your revenues to other cities, this is going to be almost impossible because Shakopee is unique in the fact that you are the only city in Scott County that is actually dealing with fiscal disparities the way they do. So if you tried to compare to other communities, they are receiving fiscal disparities. Ours is a reduction. So that's your primary element of your property taxes. One thing that's different also in the city of Shakopee is tax increments. You really don't get much. The tax increments are handled in this city as a pay-as-you-go TIF. They're standalone funds. They do not flow through the general fund. Other cities, larger cities, receive a significant amount of revenues there. That's just not occurring in Shakopee. It's not a revenue source. Special assessments, what that is in Shakopee is the revenues that flow through when you certify certain things to the county, such as the refuse, the false alarms, the unpaid bills, those types of amounts. Again, very limited amount of revenue because your special assessments flow through the funds that are assessed for projects. So that's a whole different set of funds. Licenses and permits, again, unique in the fact that you haven't seen a lot of increase in Shakopee over the years on licenses and permits because they've been held pretty flat. That goes back to actions that flow into the city in the mid-2000s where there was questions regarding permits and fees and what was collected and et cetera. One area that I've been speaking with the department heads on over the last few months as we've done budget planning is we will be reviewing the fee schedule in great scrutiny this fall. When you get the fee schedule in 2012 December, there will be some questions on there as to how does the council wish to proceed. You have areas in your permits that simply are not covering costs. They have been held low for some time, but I think it's an area that we will be discussing with council as to what is your direction. I think it's time to really assess the types of charges you're getting in the permits and maybe look at those for an adjustment upwards. Licensing is held pretty flat. Those are your things like your liquor licenses and such. And again, each year those come forward in a fee schedule, and we do work on looking at where are you at in relation to other communities or where are you at with state statute.
Julie, is this, the way we've got this in here now, is this keeping everything the same?
Keeping it fairly flat. Specifically in the building permits, Mr. Leak and I have met numerous times and talked about if we were going to assess where we are at with the rates where they are, but based on what we can somewhat anticipate for additional business or new growth or whatever, we've reflected a little of that in here, but not the increases that we're looking at that we may need to make. There's some other parties outside that work specifically in rate structures that we'd really like to talk to and get some ideas of, you know, what's a realistic amount to bring forward? What's a fair and reasonable amount? And that's our goal. That takes a little time, so we're pursuing that. The next category you'll see highlighted here is what we call intergovernmental. Now, those are the dollars that we get from the federal sources, the state, the county, and on any other group that would be affiliated with an intergovernmental revenue. We get some dollars federally. Again, there was a time, and I know some of you will remember the wonderful era of federal revenue sharing. Incredible amounts of money would come in the 70s from the federal revenue sharing program, and federal money line items were significant. As you can see, those dollars have gone just almost immaterial. The state money that you see reflected here, and I'll take you back to a discussion you had earlier when we talked with the engineering staff regarding capital projects. Most significant component of the state revenues is municipal state aid. Now, the dollars we have put forward here include that amount that is kept in the general fund. And when engineering staff talk to you about the issues with the funding of Seal Coat, Crackville, moving all that over to the capital improvement fund, that would be a very significant decision on the part of the council. If you were to no longer bring that into the general fund, you would have to find a way to either make that up or deal with the increase needed through a tax levy. So at this point, I wanted to bring it forward. We've left it there. We want to bring it forward to the council for discussion. but that's what's primarily in there is your municipal state aid and other intergovernmental revenue sources. County, again, limited amounts of dollars coming through that we budget. Charges for services, that's an interesting discussion. Those are items that are billed to our outside services, a group that was here tonight. What do we bill the townships for the fire district agreements? What do we bill Canterbury? What do we bill Valley Fair? What do we bill groups like the auto auction? Those are where all those costs flow through. We don't net the expenses, where sometimes you will see a city taking, here's an expense, now we're gonna apply the revenue and we're just gonna net them in a line item. That's just not an appropriate accounting mechanism, but that's why you'll see charges and services significant in that any of the dollars that we bill for that offset wages or charges of the city are reflected in the charges and services. Fines and forfeitures, again, those are the dollars that flow through the state, through Scott County for the work that is done through most of the public safety work. We receive these monthly, and they are applied here as this part of the fines and forfeits. Interest income, well, all I can say is that's taken a hit, and it probably will continue. The dollars we're hearing from our resources are saying very, very flat interest income through 2014. So I want to be conservative and realistic on what we're doing with that. So the dollars that used to flow through here, not quite as much as it was. It was a great resource of general fund revenues for years, but unfortunately no longer. And then other are things that we would get that we can somewhat anticipate but don't feel real strongly saying we know for sure what they are, such as a property and liability dividend from the league, or dollars that would come from another source. They're pretty much contingent upon experience that happens in another entity, and we would receive those dollars. And that is primarily what we go through as far as the revenue sources that flow through the city, through the general fund, and how we've allowed for them through 2013. Yes?
Councilor Lehman.
Where's the, which one is the SPUC transfer in?
Okay, that's under charges for services. Now, when we had the accounting change that we talked about in last year's audit, what used to be a transfer from SPUC to the city's general fund has now had to be restated for accounting purposes as a charge for service. In the past, that came through as a transfer in to the city. It's now moved up into the charges for services.
So
It's roughly just shy of $2 million a year.
wouldn't that make the 2013 charges for services larger than the 2010?
We've restated all years.
Oh,
It was just, when we went back with that accounting change, the auditors required us to kind of go back and do a comparable all years back as far as we could.
and so the miscellaneous and transfers in are, what are those two?
Yeah, the miscellaneous that we look at there, if you look at the combination of that miscellaneous is a combination of 225 and 83.5. That's the 308.5. Right here, watch these two, see?
The 308 and the 100,000 transfer in, what are they?
The 100,000 transfer, that is the amount Mr. Loney has estimated when he is bringing in resources that come from the capital improvement fund related to projects. That's roughly an estimated amount he's bringing in just for that.
And the 308 is?
308 is miscellaneous, which is revenues from interest earnings or investments and other things like property and dividends, because if you take the 225 and the
Okay.
83.5, then you get that,
Got it.
okay?
Yep.
Councilor Whiting.
The fines and forfeitures, those are dedicated funds?
Yeah, what that is that's money we would get from, it's a group that collects all the money through the county, routes it through in a single distribution to all the different communities, and those have to go in to a fine and forfeit account in the general fund, and that's actually audited each year by both the city's auditors and the county's auditors.
But specific to
There's certain
crime
uses.
prevention uses, right?
Well,
Or whatever.
no, they just have to be defined as a fine and a forfeiture. Now, if it's a crime prevention, like a grant for crime prevention, those have to be specifically dedicated to like an intergovernmental grant from an outside source.
Okay, so they're not as dedicated as I'm thinking.
Not like if you were doing like the Metro Drug Task Force or the Southwest Drug Task Force, those are definitely dedicated, and that's actually in a separate fund,
Okay.
okay?
Counselor Clay?
Back up to the top row. The general fund preliminary budget for 2013 is up about 550,000 from 2012 budget. What are the assumptions for 2013 that gets us to that number?
One, an increase in fiscal disparities. Early estimates are saying there's going to be more money coming into the city from that. And that's a very interesting calculation that I'm still trying to get details on because I wasn't expecting that. I just simply wasn't.
I thought we
And
got the
Contributor.
oh, the LGA was 0.
LGA is always 0.
Right.
Yeah.
But
For 8 years.
It's been 0 for, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
think you guys have a history of when you last got LGA.
No.
No.
2003.
So
But
it's-
it's an
But
increase.
but that's assuming
Half a year.
the projected net tax capacity that we just learned from Scott County and keeping the tax rate the same as last year.
It is, your fiscal disparities may not change even if you change your tax rate. One of the pieces that's extremely interesting as we study the fiscal disparities formula is the issue of when you have a increase and a rapid increase in commercial and industrial growth, you're actually losing fiscal disparities. You haven't experienced that in the last year.
They'll probably catch up with you in a year or two.
That's what I'm concerned with. So it's one of those pieces we're all trying to learn about. There's a group of us that meet every month, and we're trying to get into the nuts and bolts of this because we'd really like to understand it. It would just make our lives so much easier.
We'll just change it.
But in the meantime, it's assuming we're not gonna understand it for now.
Yes. I think you're gonna see an increase.
But we're looking at our projected tax capacity and keeping the tax rate the same as last year to get
No.
to this 2013
No,
number?
you're
or are
going to
we-
have an increased tax rate.
Of how much?
As you recall, last meeting, we were looking at a tax rate that went up from roughly 39 to 42, even if you kept your levy flat.
And that was to accommodate,
Market value exclusion.
But 2012 was 36,655.
Oh, are you talking-
And 2013 was 39,99.
39. Wait, I have to go back to my numbers because I've
Went
not.
up by about 3.5.
Yeah.
We're talking 3 points probably?
Right, from 2012 to 2013.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
2012 was 36.655.
Okay,
and
then we went up to
2013
39, and if we increased it up, we went up to 42. Okay, now I'm tracking with you.
Right.
History took a while, but it kicked in.
Provided several.
So, in summary,
She hasn't been looking at a lot of numbers or anything. has she?
it's not funny. Okay, so that in summary is your general fund. Now, this is the interesting part of our discussion tonight.
it hasn't been interesting so far?
It's been fascinating. Now it gets interesting. There's a difference between fascinating and interesting. Okay, so let's just kind of do a once-over here because we've thrown a lot of information
Is
at
this a
you.
page
Where
we
you
have
at
in our
now?
booklet?
Huh?
Is this a new page we have in our
This
booklet?
is 33.
Okay, thank you.
Page 33 in your booklet. I just kind of want to walk you through, as we did our first cursory, let's take a look after everything's been introduced to you. I'm going to just start you out in summary. If you take your total general fund revenues, based on the items we talked about this evening, we're looking at roughly $20,555,000. That's your general fund anticipated revenues. Now, if you go down to the total expenditures, you're looking at about $20,185,000, based on all the items that have been presented in front of you. Now, this is a point, and Ms. Wilson brought a very, very good point here I want to walk through with you. If you go down to the next section, you have transfers in of $100,000. That's roughly the amount Mr. Loney and I have talked about for the projects. But if you take a look at the transfers out, what that consists of is getting back to the discussion point we had on the capital improvement fund. $500,000 taken to start meeting those capital project funds that were discussed in the multi-year program. $150,000 shown as a transfer out to the EDA per their request. The reason I'm showing those as transfers is that from an accounting standpoint of being that you don't do individual separate levies for them, you bring them in, they're part of your general fund levy, you then transfer them out. That's why they're shown in that capacity. there was never an intent to bring these through to make it look like, oh, this is a process that we're putting in place and it's a done deal. It's not. It's just how you show it in the budget process.
Councilor Lehman.
So 500 of the 650 transfer out is for the street overlay?
That is for the street projects, that entire 2012 group of projects you
Okay.
talked about, where there's limited future funding, and our concern is there has to be some dedication of funding for your future needs. When you take all of this into effect, and we're not bringing forward any of the initiatives, we're not bringing forward any of the new positions, we're not bringing forward anything, just the presentations as you saw them, you're about 180,000 at this point, potential use of 2013 fund balance. So that's kind of the starting point we need to get you thinking through. That's if you maintain a flat levy.
It's the fund balance.
Fund balance right now is about off the top of my head, I'd have to run it for July, but I'm gonna just give you a 9.3 million general fund balance.
And that's higher than normal because we got our first half settlement.
You got your first half settlement, but that also.
That's cash flow through the end of the year.
Yeah, you have to cash flow until December now, because we won't see that second half settlement till December.
Councilor Clay.
So 500,000 of the 650,000 that's marked as transfers out is actually just moving money from the general fund to a savings account for
The
capital improvements to
capital
be used later.
funds.
So it's not an expenditure, it's we're
Right.
just transferring it out.
It's transferring it for their needs in 2013.
All right.
Mhm.
And then the total revenues,
Those do not reflect a property tax increase. They do not reflect increases to the fee schedule. They don't allow for increases in park and rec fees or building fees or any of the other topics.
do they reflect any of the budget improvements for new hires, things like that?
Nothing. Nothing
That's
is
just-
in here. That's the next
That's just
step.
everything being the same as last year.
Just keeping the same. Mhm. Now realize, what it does allow for is a 2% wage adjustment that we talked about, and allowance for the no-one we have in the health insurance. These are the pieces we brought forward because those are items that have either been agreed upon in contract or are in a package that has been brought forward for approval. But those are the only pieces at this point that are allowed for. So then, is that okay if we move?
I have a question first. All right, so the 500,000 in road funds and that the transfers out,
Right.
is that based on any particular number we've seen so far? Because the last one that I saw was 440 or whatever that was.
That would be the minimum amount, as Mr. Loney and I
So-
have looked at to what you are going to have based on future unfunded costs that we would recommend go to that fund.
All right, so 440 and then we're just saying 500 to.
Right,
to-
because we're looking at numbers coming through and different things popping up as they're working this summer and projects coming forward.
Okay,
You always have the 5% engineer contingency and the 10% corrections and all
And
that.
very honestly, we're worried about the price of oil. That's another factor that's really starting to
affects
factor in
blacktop.
on all this,
right.
okay?
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so then moving from that, 'cause I know we're throwing a lot of numbers your way, so feel free at any time to stop, slow down, take a look. The next piece is then to get back to where what we are saying is, we would like to talk with you about these initiatives. We realize with 4 individuals here, it's difficult. At this stage, we understand. There were items put forward to discuss and to bring forward. We took, based on the initiatives that have been presented to you, the positions and the projects. The positions we've brought forward on a full year cost, but we also have in your book, if you go to pages 34 and 35, we've also taken these and provided them on the, if you take the positions with the start date that don't start 1/1/13, where are you at on 13? But then let's convert that and see, but let's take a look at a full year cost, because ultimately that's what you'll be looking at. So we use that full year cost on 35 to go here to determine, take these positions, and you base your review of these potential costs on your 2012 tax levy, 12,976. What percentage of the levy, or what type of an increase would you be looking at roughly, based on what we know now? And we're hoping that enables you to have some guidance as you look ahead and think, what do you want to bring into your 2013? What do you want to defer? What do you want to eliminate? What are the actions that you would like to go forward with? Based on that, we can then build forward the preliminary levy, the preliminary budget, and as you're aware, those will come to you September 4th, and anything can be adjusted downward, but once you set that levy, it cannot be increased. That's the step we're looking at as to moving ahead with decisions and the next step you would like to approach and when you would like to do it. We are scheduled to meet the 28th. We can go forward based on adding all of this to the budget, adding portions of it. We would just like your direction on how you would like to do this and what works best and what other pieces do you need.
All right, all right, so based on these,
Oh, and what things
Sorry.
would you like to add? We haven't done that. If there are pieces that you haven't had an opportunity to add, what would those be?
For the last number of years that I can remember, we've always had a house worth was 100 and, typical house in Shakopee was
Mhm.
Average value of
180,000.
180 something, yes.
Mhm.
you know, how does that affect our taxes?
Well,
It's cost per household.
Yeah, we've used that as
Yep.
something to help us judge for
and if
1
you
year.
go back to your last work session, go to your divider that's labeled 813. Now go to the back pages. As an example, because this is the year it's going to be complicated. Okay? This, I'm gonna use the request from Councilmember Lehman had, and we'll go with that. Now,
Okay, those pages were numbered. What page number? are you-
25, 26, 24.
oh, upsie.
Oh, it's not all of them. Which one is it that you're putting?
24
I think the one she
of
has is.
Scott County property
This is one
tax.
that we pulled together because we wanted to just get a little idea of what we were looking at. If you go to your,
So it's
handout.
not one that's in the book
Sorry.
then, Julie?
No.
It was handed out at the last session. If you went with a 2% increase, and kept the property tax for the fire referendum flat. You took a house that had a 2013 value of 195. You're looking at 83.29 increase, $83.29.
Out of a total of 722.
And that's contingent on their value falling.
Exactly. All of this is contingent upon, and we hope to get updated data this week from the county to make sure we give you the most current.
If the value stayed the same or went up, then it would be a
So
larger.
it's
You got it.
80-some dollars?
About 87. Now,
What do you mean that was contingent on their value falling? That's staying the same. There's no change.
If their value went up, then the increase would be greater.
right.
Right.
If their value
Anyone
went down,
seeing,
it would be 87, or no change would be 87.
Oh, you're saying
Right.
that they went down to that. Okay, I
Right.
see what you're saying.
Right.
Okay.
okay, if you were to go back to the question here, let's use the same one, and let's take a 5% levy increase. And you were to go back,
The first one you showed us was what
that's
percent?
page 26 of your last, of your,
$57 on no change.
If
value.
everybody got what they were asking for,
right,
in a great and wonderful world, you know, with rose-colored glasses,
8%.
what percent? We're looking at 8%.
8%
Okay, well,
levy.
go to 8%. Let's
I don't
go backwards from that.
have
no?
Take 5 and
8%.
3
I can
and,
get that to you tomorrow, because I'm just going,
Oh, please do that.
8%. Okay, so
I-
let's go to 5%.
I wanna know what the very top is, and
Okay,
then
I would go 10% if I was gonna go meeting everyone's needs.
You're gonna meet my
You
needs,
can't
it's
go to
gonna be about
Jamaica for
30.
6 months out of the year.
You know, if we get those paperless packets, okay, so let's trap back here on 5%. And as we discussed, you know, that brings forward just about $700,000 increase in your levy. If you had a house of the 195 value, it would go up 111 versus 2% at 87. Now, if I was in the house that saw a rapid increase in value, I'd be looking at a $260 increase.
And it's $20 a month.
And if I was in the group that had the very low and saw a 15% decline in my value, I'd be going down $37. Yeah.
Councilor Lehman?
Do we know what the impact is on business property?
At this point, the only numbers the county is running because of the problems with the exclusion is the residential.
If I remember the last meeting we had on this, I think it was Councilor Clay, said a lot of this was being moved
borne.
over to the business,
It's borne by industrial, commercial, rental, agriculture.
which means that we're going against our own economic development concept, because now we're making it harder on business.
It all
It's-
depends on
it's
where you
not-
go.
We're not making it harder.
When you say "we," you're not talking about us.
Yes.
No,
Sitting at
yeah,
the table,
the
you're talking about the
legislative
state
bodies.
legislature.
Right.
Let's be
Government
clear
in
about
general.
that.
Yeah.
yeah.
I agree. I hit it. But, and again, it's all totally contingent upon what's happening with your value. And it's just a really moving target right now. I wish I could give you more facts, but I can't. But we will pull together everything we can that we have for the most current. But I think one of our primary questions as we moved ahead with these questions of the initiatives is, what was the council's concerns? Were there items here that they wanted added that we may not have added? Are there items here that we need to bring into this list?
What
All
page
right,
are we back
let's,
to?
We're going on to page
34.
34 of the 820 work session.
Let's start with if there's anything that we can axe out of this that we've currently got in here. And we're not gonna have, without Counselor Sherman here, we're not gonna have significant
No.
conversation on this. But if there are things that the four of us agree generally can come out, then I'd rather give staff direction on that at this point. So right now, I think the public relations social media coordinator can come out because I like the plan for communication coordinator full-time. Is that fairly agreed upon?
That should work. I mean, as long as that person can handle that job.
Chris? Steve? Counselor
You're
Clay?
taking out who?
Second line item, public relations social media coordinator.
Taking that out if we leave in the communications
Correct.
coordinator.
Okay.
Counselor Lehman? Well, we're not there yet, Julie. Hold on.
Okay.
Counselor Lehman?
I would rather put a higher priority on the human resources technician, which Chris is screaming about making
But
her
we're taking
life
things out now.
miserable.
All we're
Well,
talking
okay.
about is what
Definite
we're eliminating
non-starters.
right now is what we're doing.
All
We're
right.
not prioritizing by any means. We're just seeing what we can pull out that we don't have to have the conversations about.
And if you want me to leave them in and bring them through the numbers, we can
Nope.
gladly do that.
Is there anything else that we can pull out right now?
Natural resources technicians, if you go with the 4 firefighters, you can take out the 6, because the fire station, as the chief said, could get put off a little bit if he had the duty crew. or-
Right, but that's
or 4.
more of a discussion than we have to have than right now.
Okay.
As well as I'm not willing to take natural resources out.
All right.
Let's just, hold on.
Grant writers,
Your centralized recycling.
I'd take it out.
Okay? What's the verbiage
Um,
on that? A head nod or a thumbs up?
Wait,
Take it out.
Counselor Clay?
Yeah.
Counselor Whiting, feasibility studies.
That I'm concerned about now. There was some talk about, at the state level, if something could come through there. I think it's important that we look at that train. It's only gonna get longer. It's only gonna get more train traffic.
There's significant possibility for state help with that.
Is this just a election year promise, or is this actual?
Anything's an election year promise.
That's
I
what
mean,
I'm concerned
nothing is
about.
through yet.
That's what I'm concerned about.
And we can leave it where,
I want to see at least a good portion of that left.
I think it's a waste of money.
These are feasibility studies for
There
the,
were two.
Yeah,
One was
those-
for
Whistle zone.
whistle-free zone in the downtown, which is to be 80 to 100,000. The other was for architectural study of the
Archaeological.
downtown fire station.
Oh, is it?
I have both
Part
of
of it?
those.
I thought it
Hang
was
on just a
archaeological.
second. I'll pop that back up
Fire
for
station
you.
wasn't part of it, it was archaeological.
Yep.
Okay?
And,
This was the information on the feasibility study. Let me
Yep,
pop.
you're right, sorry.
Does that help?
So I think that's gonna be significant to get a few projects rolling, at least the archaeological portion of it, if you think the train portion of
archaeological
it.
studies in Memorial Park, I think we could count on the local gaming community to help fund that.
I'm not convinced of that, but we could try.
all right, so we're gonna leave it in for now. We will
Would you
have
like to leave
more-
the full 100? We can adjust dollars.
I'm not excited about spending 90 grand on train right now. Do you think you have 3 votes for it?
I can give you a bunch of information on that topic. You're wasting money.
The feasibility studies would be a waste of money.
Yes. We pretty much know where everything stands.
All right, we will continue to have discussions on that one.
There's always next year.
Okay?
Well,
So
let's,
leave in the 100?
No,
Why don't we
Wait, what did you say?
take it out. We'll worry about it next year.
Can we leave 20 grand in there for the other portion of that?
Absolutely.
So it goes from 100 to 20?
Reduce to
Correct.
20. Okay?
Neighborhood festivals. Where are you at on that?
I would like to leave that in there. It can always come out later.
Pull it
Doesn't
out.
need to come out tonight.
I'd take it out. I'd take the flower baskets out too.
Oh, we gotta leave those in.
We gotta leave something.
Pat Heitzman's mom will be after me with a stick if we, if we don't get those back in there.
Okay, there's your neighborhood festivals.
Let's move up to grants writer. I don't want to pull this one out yet because I want to get Counselor Sherman's
Okay?
thought on it, but what do other members and staff think about that item? Is it something that we think we could start pulling in more money to be able to, into the future, reduce our dependency on levy? Or what do you guys think?
Right now, the grants that the city has applied for, typically by departments, police, parks, are doing well with that, but it's been very limited. The thing with grants is that typically requires matching, and oftentimes is for major projects. Typically, we've not geared up for those.
Okay.
So, you could fund it. I don't know what the cost effectiveness or the return would be, at least early on.
Right, we have no idea. That's Whiting.
Would that be able to fit into a portion of that human resources technician, Chris? Do you think that somebody with some writing ability could be added into the job description?
I think it's a little bit of an odd combination. If anything, I would have our communications coordinator help review grant applications and maybe give some pointers or tips to departments that are submitting, if you're looking for a place to combine it. I
Right.
would see using her writing skills to try to make the grant applications stronger. That
Right.
doesn't really take the burden off of the individual subject matter experts in our departments to pull
Right.
those together. But if you're looking for a combo, I would make the combo there.
That would, because she has such a keen eye for detail, and when you're submitting these grants, you have to have every single component met and addressed.
It's
And
still-
that's a piece.
I'm sorry, it's still gonna be dependent upon departments, however, knowing
Exactly.
where grants
They
are.
have to
Public
provide
Works
the
is now
initial data.
Major recipient.
Right.
And they have to have the time to meet and go
Yeah.
through all of this. That's the big problem part that we would have right now.
It's still dependent on whether you have the matching dollars for
Yeah.
it. And if you don't have the dollars allocated, you can apply, get it, and say, we don't have the dollars to match it, so.
We want.
No, that's not true, though. I mean, there are lots of grants out there that give money to do things. I mean, it's just a matter of, what I see this position doing is finding the grants that we can use, because that's, I mean, everybody is strapped, and there's no way to, not no way, but there is not enough time when everybody's getting their day-to-day job done to go looking for that other thing that could really help pull in money, like,
You're putting a position in place at a time when our federal government is just about ready to go off a cliff.
Oh, it's not either. You've been saying that for the last 5 years.
Well,
and we're
I mean,
still
they've got a deadline that they put in front of them right now called sequestration.
there are
It's
always
coming.
new deadlines, and we can
So,
control what we can control, and I
Let's try to
agree
get
with you, we
money
should
out of
watch our
a,
back.
out of a rock. The
Okay,
federal
now
government.
on this grant writer,
Mhm.
there's nothing that says we can't make it a half-time, which is suggested, 2-year position. So it's,
Well, you can always do a temporary fill.
listed as a temporary 2-year half-time position, so that whoever, gets hired understands that this is under
Then why
serious
don't you coordinate it
review.
with Scott County?
We're probably
Chris.
competing with them for the same
You can
grants.
do that. Doesn't really matter for the budget. I mean, it sets up expectations and may be viewed as a more humane way to hire somebody, to let them know going in that, they may not be here long, but they're still entitled to unemployment if we terminate them, and, so financially,
Yeah.
that doesn't really change what you're looking at.
Right.
I'm not there with it. I don't think we can give them enough work.
All right, I'd like to leave it in and see what Counselor Sherman
Okay.
thinks about it.
Even.
Is there anything else we are all in fair agreement of killing for right now? Of these line items we haven't so far?
So what have we got so far?
Mike?
We have pulled out public relations social media coordinator, the 32,3. None of the other positions have been pulled out as of right now. And I obviously suspect that there will be more pulled out as we continue discussions. In our project section, feasibility studies, we've gone from 100,000 to 20,000. And we have pulled out centralized recycling.
But the flower baskets are still in.
Flower baskets are still in.
You're
And
still
our
safe for now.
festivals,
Plastic flowers?
Mrs. Heitzman, the flower baskets are still in.
and the security system camera upgrade.
I got a question on that.
Yeah.
That was just adding a couple cameras, that wasn't replacing all the cameras.
Software update too.
Software update.
Software is the biggest
It
part
was
of it.
to
So
give
it's
you
not like we
more-
have any value left in,
Right.
Two
It's
cameras.
bringing license plate true
so you don't need new
visuals.
cameras. It's not a full camera upgrade. Okay,
It's the software, the
yeah.
storage on it. All right, anything else that we're comfortable pulling out for right now that we are fairly unanimous on? All right, does that give you a little help, Julie?
It does, I just wanna be sure, where did you go on the 6 paid on-call, 4 full-time in the
Whole
firefighters?
another conversation.
Said we're gonna have a
Those are still in.
conversation.
You want both of them left in? Got it. Okay.
Well, you
I
can,
wouldn't count
you can
on
use I think we can be safe to say that we can use a max of 250.
Which means then to
But you
remove
wouldn't
the
do
6.
both.
We wouldn't do both, so we can use them, we don't, between the two of them, the most we'd put, so we can pull 80,000 out of there.
Right,
Um,
for now.
right.
Of the total of the both.
Right, so between those two of them, so we got 330-ish between the two of them, we're only gonna spend 250 max.
Why?
Because if we go with the 4 full-time, we can put off the fire station for 2 years or so. Or 3 years, the chief said.
So we're not gonna do 4 full and 6 paid.
Right.
Mark, did you have something you wanted to say?
Nope.
Is that, what do you think about that, Counselor Clay?
I think we should leave them both in for now.
Okay,
Okay, I'll leave them both in.
done?
Probably better.
Is there any other items? Was there anything anyone wanted to add? Were there other projects that were coming forward? Things that you hadn't had addressed?
How
that
about the
we
crime
need to bring?
prevention specialist? Is everybody sold on that?
I think he made a pretty good argument that it was cost efficient, a position that's gonna save money and all things considered.
I'm not as convinced as you, but,
Okay,
I think where I agree with him is you're actually gonna take a licensed officer and put him back on the street,
absolutely.
which is needed, so.
Why do you, well, we're gonna have these conversations with
Right.
Counselor Sherman here, so we don't need to do it twice.
Okay,
Um,
we'll move forward with this.
Anything else? Okay,
We made some cuts, can we throw in a $400,000 or $500,000 slush fund for us?
The what?
Can you add a $500,000 slush fund for us?
I certainly
Yeah.
can.
Boxes of money.
That's always an
Only
ad.
usable by Mr. Clay and myself.
I have more money than I know what my wife can spend right now, so I don't need it.
That sounds like a challenge.
That is a rousing endorsement for a very smart man.
All right, is there anything else you need from us tonight,
Well,
Julie?
we will come back with this information in a format next Tuesday. And one of the pieces that I would like to present would be the, more or less like the draft resolutions of what you'll see in front of you then on September 4th, so that you can get a perspective on this is what will be in front of you. You'll be able to see what you're going to be dealing with. If you have any questions, we can walk through those pieces of that. Is there any other items we can provide for you next Tuesday? Just let
You
us
can
know,
bring
call
coffee
anytime.
and pizza and food.
Yeah,
for-
I'm liking that.
Can we try to get impacts on,
Property taxes and
Business
beyond
property.
residential, yeah. We can,
Next
let me
Tuesday?
see what I can track. Michael Thompson has had some real
6:30 workshop on
interesting discussions on that, and I'm kind of curious to see what he comes back with.
6:30?
Yeah, I'd be glad to try that.
then I'd be curious to see what the impacts of the healthcare
That's a what?
changes are gonna be.
I think a lot of us are very curious what this is gonna do.
Not gonna have that by Tuesday.
Do we, is the possibility
last
of
one.
the increase for elections in your increased money for
A
elections?
small amount is, yes, because, again, as we talk with
We don't know yet.
Here's the problem, because you've got two things going on. We've got new individuals running city elections, you've got a very new person running county elections. We're getting a sense that a lot of things might be driven back to the city that have currently been handled by the county. We're talking, we're discussing, I don't know where that's gonna go.
Things like
Okay.
what?
You know, Minneapolis
Some
has.
of the just clerical processing details that have always been, go up to the county, leave the information there, and you go. That might not be the future of Scott County right now.
All right.
She has virtually no staff. It's her.
Minneapolis has a feasibility on what it's gonna cost Minneapolis and St. Paul on their website under elections.
It's really frightening.
It's huge.
It's so frightening, I
It's
can't
an
even
unfunded
imagine it.
mandate, like
Mhm.
incredibly for them.
Because if you bring the technology pieces in, they're talking that we're going to have to identify very specific details about individuals. It's staggering. It makes what you do right now in IT nothing.
What changed, what did I miss?
It's a voter
Nothing.
Voter ID.
You have
The
to have two voter ID
issues
passes.
with the voter identification.
She already asked me who I was when I was there for primaries.
There
Yeah.
could be.
I teach them every year the same thing. She says, there's two of you in here. I said, yeah, I know, look at the birth dates. Oh, that's what them are for. I'll be the older one.
I'd
All
claim the
right.
young one if I could get away with it.
Any other items?
Just
Mr.
quickly,
McNeil?
just for council's information, you'll be getting information tomorrow, but Bruce Loney has a quick consent agenda add to take advantage of a possibility on the 18th, County Road 18 trail modification. Just to give you a heads up, that'll be add on tomorrow night.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to Tuesday, August 21st at 7 PM.
Make a motion to
Same
adjourn
bat time,
Tuesday,
same bat place.
Not same
August
time.
27th at
Close.
21st.
21st at 7
Casey.
p.m.
All right, do we have a
Don't you remember
second?
that? Come on, you were in that era. Remember when they
7
came on
p.m.
every time? Same
Second.
bat time.
Second by Councilor Lehman.
You
Any
don't
discussion?
remember. You're too young.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passed unanimously. We are adjourned at 9:31.